Holy See-Israel relations deals with the diplomatic relations between the Holy See and the State of Israel. Formal diplomatic relations between the two states were established in 1993 after the adoption of the Fundamental Accord by the two states on 30 December 1993. A Vatican nunciature in Israel and an Israeli embassy in Rome were established on 19 January 1994. From the Vatican's point of view, the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two states is part of the Christian-Jewish reconciliation. And from the Israeli point of view, the normalization of diplomatic relations. Prior to the establishment of diplomatic relations, the interests of the Catholic Church in Israel were looked after by the Apostolic Delegate to Jerusalem and Palestine, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem and the Custodian of the Holy Land, all of which continue to function. Andrea Cordero Lanza di Montezemolo was appointed as the first Apostolic Nuncio to Israel. Shmuel Hades was appointed first Israeli ambassador to the Holy See in September of that year. The present nuncio to Israel is Leopoldo Garelli, who was appointed on 13 September 2017. He follows Giuseppe Lazzarato, who was appointed in 2012, Antonio Franco, who was appointed in 2006, Pietro Sambi, who was appointed in 1998, and the first nuncio to Israel, Andrea Cordero Lanza di Montezemolo. The present Israeli ambassador to the Vatican is Oren David. Zion Evroni was the ambassador from 30 September 2012 to 2016. He followed Mordechai Louis, who was appointed in May 2008, Oded Ben-Hur, and Shmuel Hades. The fundamental agreement between the Holy See and the State of Israel was signed by the Holy See and Israel on 30 December 1993 and entered into force on 10 March 1994. It deals with the property rights and tax exemptions of the Catholic Church within Israeli territory. Following the agreement, the Holy See established on 15 June 1994 full diplomatic relations with Israel. The Holy See set up an apostolic nunciature to Israel in Tel Aviv and appointed an apostolic nuncio. Several outstanding issues had still to be resolved. On 10 November 1997, the Holy See and Israel entered into a legal personality agreement, but neither of these agreements have been passed by the Knesset. By the agreement, Israel would recognize the juridical personality and the authority of canon law within the Catholic Church and its institutions, as well as those of the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem and of the Eastern Catholic Patriarchates, and their respective dioceses in the territory of Israel, and their recognition of prevailing Israeli law in civil and criminal matters. Diplomatic tensions often arise due to the non-resolution of the accords relating to property rights and tax exemptions for the Church in Israel, the political activism of clergy in Israel and the Palestinian Authority, and the interplay between Israel-Vatican relations, on one hand, and the Jewish-Catholic inter-religious dialogue, on the other. The main concerns of the Vatican in Israel is the protection of the Latin Rite Catholic churches, its properties and assets, and of the holy places. Israel, for its part, has often taken offense at matters perceived by the Church to be internal, but of religious, historical consequence by the Israel and Jews around the world. However, relations remain tense because of the non-fulfillment of the accords giving property rights and tax exemptions to the Vatican. From the Vatican point of view, Holy See relations with Israel have both political and theological aspects. It views Israel's ambassador as a representative of Israel and not of the Jewish people. And if he accompanies a religious delegation, the Jewish religious leaders present must be Israeli citizens. Any similar delegation composed of non-Israeli Jews would be accompanied by the respective national ambassador. For Israel, as with most states, the ability to assess diplomatic relations with a state that is lacking economic relations cannot be quantifiable. Furthermore, since the Vatican is not a full member of any international organization but only an observer in, since official Vatican statements are phrased in extremely nuanced language, much public diplomacy amounts to interpreting papal statements. Thus, to understand this unique relationship, traditional parameters must be replaced with a framework that employs a totally different set of parameters. From the Vatican point of view, the nuncio, who has a rank of archbishop, has both political and theological functions. Besides his religious functions, the nuncio also cares about the well-being of all Catholics in Israel and intervenes on their behalf with the authorities. In this respect, the nuncio's relations with government authorities overlap with the prerogatives of the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem. The nuncio does not participate in the presidential New Year reception in honor of the non-Jewish religious leadership, but participates in the annual